114 scoring.
Scoring, also moving the ball down the field, the sports world fallacy. Hey, sports fans. An instance of faulty analogy, the common contemporary fallacy of inappropriately and most often offensively applying sports, gaming, hunting, or other recreational imagery to unrelated areas of life, such as war or intimacy. Example, nope, I haven't scored with Francis yet, but last night I managed to get to third base. Or we really need to take our ground game into Kim's half of the field if we're ever expected to score against North Korea. This fallacy is almost always soaked in testosterone and machismo, an associated fallacy that is that of evening up the score, also getting even, exacting tit for tat vengeance as though life were some sort of point score sports contest. Counter arguments to the scoring fallacy usually fall on deaf ears, since the one and only purpose for playing a game is to score, isn't it? Um, this one's really, yeah, this is interesting to me. I don't like, yeah, I don't know. This is a interesting one. Because I see nothing wrong with making analogies to help make an outcome or a goal really clear. Um, it's it's standard communication, but I also like what's being highlighted in this is like, yeah, I think where I'm having an issue is what's being highlighted in this particular description is like all of the negative and poor intentions around this, but it's like what really is happening is it's talking about it's like making an analysis or making an analogy with sports. And it's like, well, th- yeah. So the part that I'm with this one I'm having a little bit of an issue with is like all of the examples are like very intensely negative, and it's like, yeah. So I don't know. There's like a dual meaning thing in here that I don't know. Like I could if I looked at anything. Like if I were to take this seriously, or if I were to like look at this and fully validate what it's trying to say, I could argue that any analogy ever made is a fallacy as long as the analogy is being used in a negative way. Um, yeah, so that's interesting. But yeah, I guess like because have I used sports as a way to make analogies? Yes, I have, but I don't know if that's a fallacy. I think it's just using analogy. Um, I could see that for me, the one that makes more sense to me in this one is like evening up the score. And I do think, as an example, I think that in life, what's far more important than creating a win-lose scenario, which in most sports, if not all sports, there's a win-lose. Um, in life, what it is that we're really looking for in every situation is a win-win. How to make sure that every single person wins from the things that we're doing, not just who wins and who loses. And so I think the idea of comparing life to a sporting event promotes usually the come from of we are trying to win so someone else can lose. And so that part where it talks about evening up the score and tit for tat vengeance style, yes, 100% for me. I'm in agreement with that being a fallacy, and it's like because just the sheer idea of taking somebody's like the part of us that the kind of like the more like primal part of us that wants to see someone else lose when we win. it taking advantage of that and using that in a way that supports us getting an outcome. I agree that's a fallacy, and I have done that at times in the past in my life when I was living more from a place of either you win or you lose. There is no way to create a win-win across the board. I've since obviously changed that way of thinking and way of being. But the first one about scoring in general, that one, I don't know, that whole thing, I don't feel right about it. Just in reading it, I'm like, that's making an analogy. There's nothing wrong with making an analogy just because it's to me as I read it and the person's like very testosterone and machismo. I'm like, okay, it sounds like the person who's writing this has a problem with testosterone and a problem with being direct, being uh, with sports in general. So I think that this one, if I'm being honest, for the person who wrote it, my personal take is that they have more of a problem with masculinity and testosterone than they do with yeah the idea of scoring or whatever that means. So those are my thoughts on it. Bryce says the main problem is that if it's coming down to literally sports, is that it's an invalid analogy because life isn't a sport competition necessarily of one team versus another team like it is in a sport where it's just fun and not made for specific points. You could say that a lot of analogies are invalid analogies, but what would make an analogy valid is if all of the examples line up and they are still true at the same time in the same context. But I would argue that almost anything with sports would constitute as an invalid analogy. Remember, just because something is a fallacy doesn't mean that it can't also have positive uses as well. It doesn't automatically mean it's bad. I hear what you're saying, but in the writing, it only paints it as negative things. So it's like we can say just because it's a fallacy, it's not bad. That's fine. But in the analogies, it's just pointing at negative things. So it's like we can say it's not bad if it's a fallacy. That's fine. But the person who's writing this and the writing of the thing is pointing only at negative things. So it's like, I don't know, like that's like even gaslighting ourselves. It's gaslighting the lighting. It's like or the writing. It's like it's not negative. Well, but everything they're saying is negative. Like I hear that.